Hello and welcome back to the Naked Expat channel. Today I'd like to talk about something that is been in reaction to a YouTube short that I did about why would you rent instead of buying as an expat. And I appreciate that not everybody's the same, but just like an older expat with a younger Asian wife, oh yeah, but she's different. Sometimes we're not as different as we would like to think we are. And there are lots of reasons why you may be able to justify buying a property abroad as an expat. And there's lots of reasons why perhaps you shouldn't. I'd like to look at a few of them now. If you are wedded on buying a property as an expat, don't bother watching anymore because I might upset you. I'm here just to give you straightforward, stripped back to basics advice. I've been an expat for 20 years. You can take my opinion with a pinch of salt, or you can really listen in and not make mistakes like I've made and other expats have made before me. Firstly, you have to ask yourself where you are currently. Are you a UK expat? Are you American, European, Australian? It's important to know where you are first and where you want to go, because it does have implications. For example, property laws and inheritance tax laws are different in the UK to that of Australia, countries in Europe and America, which may determine whether or not you're going to buy property in one of those countries. Similarly, are you a high net worth client, HNW? If you're a high net worth client, like I've had many previously in my experience as a international financial advisor, if you're a high net worth client, you can afford to have one or two properties, and you can afford to have things go wrong too, but you can have one or two properties in other countries, and it doesn't represent too much of your free asset ratio. This is something that is always ignored by the vast majority of expats. When they think about, say, retiring in their middle age, say they're British and they want to retire to Asia, certainly if they are perhaps more vulnerable, like middle-aged 50-plus men that are going to Asia, they fall in love, they want to buy a property, or they want to do the right thing and have something as a legacy for their long-standing Filipino or Thai fiance, wife, or even girlfriend in a lot of instances. But the problem is, unless you're a high net worth client, that investment might represent a very high proportion of your overall net worth. And that's not wise, because liquidity when you're older is extremely important. It's essential. Ill health may require you to have medical treatment, which could incur massive fees abroad. Health insurance over the age of 75 or 80, forget it, because most health insurance providers internationally will give you health insurance in your 50s and 60s and early 70s. But after 75, the premiums and the restrictions and the caveats and the small print makes it virtually impossible for you to claim, and they wriggle out of anything. And in a lot of instances, you got to pay like 10,000 US dollars a year premium for like 20,000 US dollars worth of cover, because the amount that they're prepared to cover, your sum assured, reduces as you get older because your risk to the underwriters is higher and the cost goes up. Meaning, really, you should have a contingency fund in case of emergencies. So you can't go putting lots and lots of large amounts of capital into property. You've got to try and avoid that. So free asset ratio is also extremely important. As a lot of people know, if you're a foreigner, let's say, in Asia, you're not able to own land. Well, there's a big issue to begin with. Some people say, well, why don't I rent instead of buy? Good option. But they don't like the idea of renting because you can't make the home yourself. You may be under increased pressure from your partner to own a property. You've got to question yourself, well, actually, hang on a minute. It might be in her best interest because she knows that she ultimately can own that land as, say, a Filipino or Thai or Vietnamese, and you can't. Some expats think, oh, well, say, for example, in the Philippines, if you're married and you buy land as a husband and wife, your Filipino wife, and you look at the property details, and I've seen it stated so many times online, in YouTube, places like on social media like Facebook, oh well, I'm okay because my name's on the title. No, the way that it's worded, it should be your first clue. Owner is the Filipino wife, married to, and then your citizenship, your name, your citizenship, say, you know, like Joe Bloggs, British citizenship, passport number, etc., etc. She is the owner. It's just noted on the title deed that she's married to somebody. Now, this should give you only a very small amount of comfort, because some people that may be interested in buying the property, if she sells it behind your back, realise that, well, we don't want any drama, so we want the signatures of both people that are named on the title before we buy this property. So they're going to want your signature as well as your wife's. However, not everybody's like that, because some investors, certainly if she's selling it at a below market value, are going to think, hang on a minute, I don't care, because I know ultimately she's the owner of the property. I don't care about this other person. I got your signature. I've paid the money. The deal is done. And you've lost your house. She does not need your signature in order to buy that house, in order to sell that house. So if you think differently, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. With regards to this, which is window. This is a window. Excuse my artwork. I was never very good at art. There we go. There's window. If your relationship breaks down and your, say, Asian partner wants to sell the property, there goes your assets out the window. You don't own that property. Likewise, if you suffer ill health, if you haven't got a contingency fund, a lot of your capital net worth is going to be spent covering medical bills and hospital bills. Assets out the window. A lot of foreigners make huge mistakes when they move abroad. They tie up too much in bricks and mortar. A property can be a very, very good investment, but it's extremely illiquid. So in times of emergency, it's very, very difficult to get your hands on that money. And as we all know, a property is only worth as much as somebody is prepared to pay for it. Now, what are other issues with regards to buying rather than renting? The key major ones are, well, if I buy a property, I can't own it. And that should be your first alarm bell. In a lot of countries, you're not able to own land, so you can't own it. You can maybe buy a condominium, but the vast majority of people know that condominiums are highly overpriced. The management companies may end up not being very, very good, and the property quality can deteriorate over time, leaving you with a depreciating asset. Likewise, other more modern condominiums that are built around the area become the latest and greatest new thing. Again, your condominium building is old, it becomes old-fashioned, old style, and not as popular. When it comes to houses, again, it's a problem because you can't own the land. So although with condominiums you may be able to own outright as a foreigner because the building is what's sat on the land, you're just owning a unit within that building. You can be ripped off with management companies, etc. Likewise with the property, your foreign spouse is the one that's going to be owning it. If you set up a shell company, which is just simply empty, it's a shell company, and within that you own a property. You've got your house within a shell company, and you've got shareholders. You only own, say, 40% of that company. There's a slice of the pie. That's owned by the foreigner. And this part, 60%, is owned by the locals. And they sign over their voting rights to you, blank sheets of paper. So you've got all the company documents, you've got signed blank sheets of paper, so you can do effectively with that company what you want. Well, interestingly enough, about 15 years ago when I was in Thailand, I know there's been a lot of political turmoil and obviously a coup as well in Thailand previously. But previously in Thailand, they had already been talking about these shell companies, in that if you do not submit tax returns and you are not a company that's actively trading, you are simply a shell company that holds assets like property. The only reason that that company exists is to circumvent the property laws where foreigners cannot own property. This has already been highlighted in Thailand. There's a lot of people in Thailand, in popular places like East Pattaya, over the dark side of Pattaya, that have got villas, etc. That's all owned by shell companies rather than a Thai girlfriend, fiance or wife. And they think they're being clever, where they're not, because a lot of people know that this is being done to circumvent local property laws. The same has happened in places like the Philippines. Good luck to you, because when they catch up, you can lose everything. All of the assets within that company can be deemed at default illegally owned and can be taken away from the state. Not a good idea. So, what are other problems with regards to owning property? Well, once you buy a property, you're stuck with it. Airbnb is a classic example of if you buy a condominium or you buy a property, and there's lots of properties and subdivisions that are rented out to wealthy Korean tour companies. If you've got neighbours that are Airbnb clients, they're going to come in, party, have a great time, create chaos and a lot of noise, and then bugger off. Well, that's no good if you've bought a condo or a house and you've got to put up with that. Likewise, if you bought a property and suddenly the neighbourhood changes, or you didn't realise that one of the neighbours has the karaoke turned up to 11 at all hours of the day and night, and then you go and complain to like the local council, the local barangay, and the barangay captain, who's in control of that, will go around and tell them to turn the noise down. You got a problem, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to find out who reported them. And now you've got that animosity, and as a foreigner, you're never going to win any arguments, and they'll be against you. And the best case scenario is they'll have their karaoke up really loud until, if it's curfew, say 10 p.m, they'll have it really loud until 9:59 every night and then turn it off, just to wind you up, because that's how petty people can get. And everybody knows that conflicts with neighbours can really escalate, and as a foreigner it's even more dangerous, because they can report you for anything. And unfortunately, as a foreigner, you're very, very vulnerable, and in a lot of instances, just like automobile accidents, as a foreigner, you're guilty until proven innocent, because if you weren't there, it wouldn't have happened. So you've got to be very, very careful. Not only your neighbours, but the whole area could be detrimental. The buildings might be detrimental. Lots of things can change. Your health. You might buy a place on the beach, and then within years realise that it's being corroded by the sea air. Your health might fail, and in ill health you need to be nearer to good hospitals. These people that retire to places like Dumaguete, for example, is a popular retirement area in the Philippines. Well, this is a 3-star local sort of municipal hotel, but you can't big it up as being a 5-star medical facility. You can't. A lot of people in the Philippines, if they can't get to somewhere like, say, St. Luke's, BGC, Makati, or a very good hospital in Cebu, or in Medical City Clark, for example, in Pampanga, they're going to go to places like Thailand. Or, if they're able to, they'll get on a plane, fly back to the UK for free treatment under the NHS. Or if they're American, in most instances, if they can, they fly back home to America to get treatment. Very rarely does anybody, joking aside, but a lot of hospitals in Asia are like butchers. So, and you'll go there, you'll get different opinions from different consultations that you have, and you really, really don't know who to trust. That's not just the Philippines, that's just in general, because a lot of hospitals are just businesses. They're in there as cash machines. They're cash cows. They make a lot of money. Why do you think that a lot of these big buildings and these plush hospitals exist? They're expensive businesses to run, they're expensive businesses to staff, but a lot of the staff are freelancers. A lot of the doctors will go to and work around 3 or 4 different hospitals and have clinics in different hospitals. And good luck to you if you have an issue with a doctor, because as always, doctors will sort of like stick together. So ill health. Another reason why, if you buy a property and you get sick, you might not want to be there anymore. And then your property just becomes a millstone around your neck. It's not a liquid asset. If you love property and you're wedded to the idea of property, this isn't discussed enough, I don't think, by potential expats and expats. Now let's say, for example, you're in the UK and you want to become an expat. So there's the UK there. You're in the UK and you want to move to, say, Thailand or say the Philippines. And you're a guy and you want to buy a property. You're like, I'm not going to rent. And you know, the land, even though all the great examples of it, there's any problems, after your rental contract's finished, you can just leave. Irrespective of whether the landlord actually gives you your security deposit back or not, in most instances, don't ever expect to get it back because there's always an excuse. But however, if you want to go to Thailand or the Philippines and you want to buy a property, well, it's a good investment. The property value is going to go up and everything's wonderful. Everything's fantastic. If you don't need the property in the future, you could rent it out, etc., etc. But the reason you're buying it, bearing in mind that I'm talking about retirees, not working people that maybe need to be more transient anyway, depending on where their company wants them to work. They're not able to make routes. But let's say you're in your 50s or 60s and you're retiring to, doesn't matter if you're retiring to Spain or Thailand or Philippines, but in this example, Thailand or Philippines, and you want to buy a house because you know that houses are a good investment. They generally go up in value. And you're not really interested in stock market risk or anything like that. Well, here's the kicker. Why not? And let's say in Thailand or Philippines, certainly in the Philippines, you're looking at 100,000 US plus to get anything half decent in a reasonably safe area. Not in the provinces, not in the middle of nowhere like your girlfriend or your wife might be really hoping and convincing you'll build a place. Not in the middle of nowhere. Not in a rice paddy, not in a jungle, living off grid, but in somewhere half decent where you can enjoy your retirement. Because it's not just about her, it's about you as well. With your facilities, you might want to be near a golf course, you might want to be near archery, you might want to be near cycling places, big swimming pools, etc., etc. Why not buy a house in the UK, and rent it out? Rent out. And let's say you're in the UK. Doesn't matter if you're in America or if you wherever you are as an expat, wherever your country of domicile is, where you were born, why don't you can own property there. So buy a house in your name in the UK, rent it out for however much you get a month, and you're going to get sterling, or you're going to get US dollars, or you're going to get euros. Rent it out and use the rent to rent somewhere in Thailand or the Philippines. There's your budget. If you rent out a property in the UK and you buy a property, you could buy a small apartment for 100, 200,000 pounds. In the US, this is the same. You're going to be spending 100, 200,000 on a decent property in Thailand or the Philippines. Make no bones about it, especially in secure subdivisions. Prices have gone up. Why not buy a property, 100, 200,000, even 300,000 pounds in the UK, rent it out, and whatever your rent is, you spend it on rent in the UK. You spend it on rent in Thailand or the Philippines. So let's say you rent out a property in the UK and you get, say, £1,000 a month. Or in the US, you rent something out and you get $1,000 a month. In the US, doesn't matter, the sort of figures work out. There's your budget. Now, that's current exchange rate, that's nearly 60,000 peso a month. Well, in most places in the Philippines, even in places like Clark, Cebu, Dumaguete, you're going to be able to rent something for 30,000 peso a month. So you're quids in anyways. There's also your electricity, your water, and probably nearly all your food as well included in that. There's your budget. Now, the only reason for not doing this is pressure from your foreign spouse saying, oh yeah, but what happens when you die? Because, you know, I've been your wife for such a long time, and, you know, or you might be really soft-hearted and you might want to leave a legacy. Say, oh, when I die, I want something in there for my wife. Well, you have anyway. Because the key thing you need to do as a UK or US expat is have two wills. You need a for your country of domicile, you need a You need, like in this example, a UK will or international will, and you need a will which covers your assets in, say, the Philippines or Thailand, and they complement each other. They don't overlap, and they don't knock against each other. So you mention your Filipino will in your international will, and you refer to your other assets abroad in your Filipino will. They're two separate entities, and they deal with different classes of assets. But the key thing is you are limiting the amount of exposure you have in overseas in a foreign country, because you are essentially keeping the vast majority of your wealth offshore. Doesn't matter if you're in the UK or the US. What you're doing is keeping the vast majority of your wealth offshore, living in somewhere like Thailand or the Philippines, or both, you know, if you want to go between the two. And as and when funds are required, you repatriate and bring money into Thailand or into Philippines. Because local taxation, local rules can change at any time. Likewise, your health can change. Likewise, your security and your circumstances can change. Your relationship could break down with your wife, 7-year itch, and everything could go down the toilet, in which case you don't want all of your money wrapped up. In Thailand, for example, and this happened to me. I sold a very, very nice condo in Nuklua, North Pattaya, for quite a lot of money. Now, I had receipts, or what's known as Tor Sams, Tor 3s, which proved all of the money coming in order to buy that condo. And I had the sales particulars, and I had all of the proof of all of the money that was brought into Thailand. But even so, Siam Commercial Bank withheld $100,000 of my money and refused to telegraphically transfer it out of the country back to my UK bank account. They did the majority, but they refused to transfer 25% of my money. As I said, about 100,000 US dollars it was. And there was nothing I could do about it, even though I had proof of bringing that money in and the foreign receipts coming in, because they wanted, hopefully, for me to retain 100,000 US dollars in an account in Thailand. Well, I wasn't having that. So basically, what I then subsequently did, although the vast majority, 75%, was transferred from Thailand back to my UK account, which was fine, I was stuck with 100,000 US dollars in a Thai bank account, and I couldn't do a lot about it. Well, yes, I could. And this is something that is also discussed online that people get wrong or they're confused about. You can travel with as much cash as you want to any country, as long as it's an agreed denomination and you declare what you're traveling with. Now, for example, I spent 7 or 8 days slowly withdrawing out of my Siam Commercial Bank that 100,000 equivalent in Thai baht. I then went to Exchange Money Changer and told them what I wanted to do so I could get wholesale rates. And every day for about a week, I went there with $15,000 worth of Thai baht in cash and got it exchanged into US dollars at a very competitive rate. Because you cannot leave Thailand with lots of local currency, just like you can't leave the Philippines with lots of pesos. You can't do it. But you can travel with internationally recognized currency like euro, sterling, Japanese yen, if you wanted to, and US dollar. So in the space of about 7 days, I'd converted that 100,000 US dollars worth of Thai baht into 100,000 US dollars in cash. And I travel with that. No problem leaving Thailand, because I'm not leaving with local currency. I'm leaving with US dollars. I came to the Philippines. When you come to the Philippines, you've got anything to declare. You are undeclared, limited to 10,000 US dollars. 10,000 US dollars and above, you need to declare, and you need to go through the red channel. Well, I got nothing to hide. I got my receipts from Siam Commercial Bank. I got my Siam Commercial savings book as well, showing the withdrawals. I've got all of the receipts from the money changer that show me changing the money. I've got my sales particular for the condo that I sold, and I've got receipts showing the telegraphic transfer of the large proportion of money going to the UK. So I've got a paper trail. All my bases are covered. I go through customs, anything to declare. Are you traveling with more than 10,000 US dollars worth of currency? Yes. And you go through the red channel. Philippines, hello sir, how can I help you, etc., etc. Well, I'm traveling with 100,000 US dollars. And the eyeballs, what? So, yeah, I've just sold a condo in Thailand. They wouldn't transfer all of the money. There's the receipts, there's the sales particulars, there's all the paperwork. Well, why are you traveling with so much cash? Well, this is the bit that's remainder and stuff. Well, why are you bringing it into the country? Well, you know, I've got a Filipino partner. I'm perhaps maybe looking at buying a property here. Okay, sir, welcome to the Philippines. That was it. No questions asked. Now, of course, I wasn't hopping into a taxi or a jimny. I had somebody waiting for me at arrivals, close friend, and straight into the car. The next day, I'm in the bank paying in that money into my account. Not a problem at all. So just so that you know that. The key thing in all of this is if you get sick, if your circumstances change, all of your wealth is offshore. It doesn't need to be at risk. I'm not talking about St. Kitts and Nevis or the Seychelles or Bermuda. I'm talking about relatively well-known and well-governed safe havens like Hong Kong or the Isle of Man, for example. They're offshore, or even US customers, even like Belize. They are secure offshore environments that you can hold monies and you bring into the Philippines what you need when you need it. So in conclusion, if you want to rent gives you a lot of flexible options. If you want to buy, really ask yourself the question, is this the place I want to be for the rest of my life? If not, can I sell it easily? Can I trust all of my neighbours? Do I absolutely know what's going on? And am I always going to be in good health? Well, no, you can't say that because people get older and people eventually become sick and people do die. As I mentioned in a previous vlog, if you're in the UK, for example, you can buy a modest property because you don't want a property that's too large that's going to encumber you with potential inheritance tax on your demise. The inheritance tax threshold is 325,000. So, okay, the property is likely to go up in value more than the inheritance tax threshold. But if you buy a property for, say, 250,000, the inheritance tax threshold is 325,000. So if you buy a property for, say, 250k and rent it out, you, with rental incomes in the UK currently, you are probably likely to get around about £1,000 a month in rental income. That's more than enough. Your spouse, who doesn't get a nil rate band if she's a foreign spouse, when you die, that's your legacy to her. She got a house. She's got a house in the UK, which she inherits. You've made a will. If you get sick, you should also have made what's known as an enduring power of attorney, which means the person that you nominate can make financial or medical decisions on your behalf. And this leads me on to the final point, which is there's over 5 million British expats living in other countries. Of that 5 million, the vast majority have not made a will and certainly have not got enduring powers of attorney. A recent survey done by a very large group of UK solicitors who did a survey of over 250,000 UK expats, only 14% of them had made a will. Less than 1% had made combining international and domestic wills, and they lived in, say, France. They've got a local will for their French assets as well as international and UK will. Or in Asia, for example, like me, for example, I live in the Philippines. I have a British/UK will and I have a Filipino will, and they complement each other. They don't conflict each other. Only 1% of those in excess of 250,000 expats that were interviewed and surveyed had done this. And rather shockingly, out of all of those statistics, 1 in 3 wills can't be found. And if they can't find a will, it's like dying without a will, which is known as dying intestate. That's shocking. So less than 1% of all the expats that were interviewed and surveyed had made local and international wills. And of that less than 1%, 1 in 3, the wills go missing and go walkies. That's why it's really important to not only make a will for the country that you're living in as an expat, but also your home country / international will, and they shouldn't conflict each other. They need to complement each other because there's legislations in different countries that mean you can and cannot do things in other wills. I have an excellent international will writing specialist that I've known for 20 years on both a personal and professional level. If you contact me via the email in the description block below, I'll put you in contact with him. He's also been on Bloomberg in the Philippines. He's a very experienced guy that's been in the business over 20 years. It's really important that not only you make wills and enduring powers of attorney, in case you lose your marbles, you want somebody to make decisions for you, but also where are these documents stored? It's not unusual for there to be floods, tsunamis, typhoons, earthquakes, volcanoes, you know, the Pacific Ring of Fire, or just simply damaged beyond repair, been eaten by rats, you know, the dog ate my homework, whatever happens, you know, these wills can get lost, these powers of attorneys can get lost. So do consider, it's very, very important, do consider a professional document storage facility, which doesn't cost a lot of money. And these professional storage companies can also replicate your will and provide a copy of it to your lawyers in the event of your demise or in the event that the original can't be found. So it's extremely important that you do consider that. In summary, the absolute best thing you can do as an expat, irrespective of whether you are, keep the vast majority of your assets offshore and only bring in to the country where you are an expat living a limited amount of your wealth. I know it's going to change depending on your circumstances, etc., but it is very, very sound recommendations for you to consider buying a property that you can actually own and control in your country of domicile, the UK, the States, Australia, Europe, wherever you come from. Rent that property out so you benefit from property investment and rental incomes, and only bring into the country where you're enjoying your retirement a limited amount of wealth. Taxation can change in both countries, which can determine these proportions, but in the vast majority of instances, it's much better to keep the majority of your money offshore and only bring in what you need. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much for listening right the way through. Please feel free to comment in the description box below. Like and subscribe, it does help my channel a lot. It does help to get these videos noticed on YouTube, which is for the benefit of everybody. I'm trying to give basic, sound, straightforward advice, as my tagline says, strip back down to basics. Thank you.